All right, there you go. We're live.
So, hello and welcome, everybody. We're very happy and excited about our talk today with Abdurrahman Al Zain. And yeah, we are Ammar and myself, Muhammad Al Gindi. We are very excited about this talk. And we're generally hosting this platform for traditional art and architecture. We're specifically interested in the element that has been, or in a sense, absent, or in a sense, not discussed from a mainstream perspective, because traditional art and architecture are usually discussed from a historical perspective in which arts and crafts are an outcome only of history, politics, economics, or we look at basically art and architecture merely as technical sort of like, fields. Here we try to explore the depth of traditional art and architecture. We're trying to do that with authenticity, which means that we're really trying to focus on the tradition. So we're seeing the tradition from the eyes of the tradition. That's what we're offering through our platform, Everything Traditional Architecture. So we're starting off with these series of talks, and inshallah, we're going to be introducing a lot more than that. So with regards to the talk today is a beautiful day. And I'm personally very excited about this talk. I've been following Abdurrahman for quite a bit, and his work has been very inspiring to me simply because it's very beautiful. And today's talk is really about contemplation through arts and crafts. Um, we will see today a vision, an integrated vision of the Islamic architecture, or Islamic basically tradition in architecture, where we have meaning that comes before form. We say in Arabic, al-ma'na qabla al-mabna. So meaning comes before form. We can say that beauty comes before structure. And we'll see how geometry, specifically sacred geometry, presents an integrated view or becomes an expression of higher realities. So today's talk is basically about our position as humans, not just in relation to where we live on this planet, but also to higher domains, in relation to basically higher meanings, how this is reflected in uh, uh, the traditional architecture and art. So today's talk is about beauty and contemplation. So I do really hope that you enjoy it, and I do hope that you stay tuned with us, because inshallah there will be more coming. So with that, I hand to Ammar, hand out the mic to Ammar.
Thank you, Muhammad. Thank you, everyone, for joining us, and thank you very much to our esteemed guest, Abdurrahman Al-Zain, for agreeing to come here and presenting. I will now do a small intro about Mr. Abdurrahman, and from there we'll give it to Abdurrahman, inshallah. Abdurrahman Al-Zain is a Lebanese architect and artist specializing in traditional Islamic architecture. He worked on restoration projects of historic buildings in Saudi Arabia and Lebanon. His work has strengthened his understanding of traditional construction, structural logic, and craftsmanship. Alongside his professional practice, drawing serves as a central method of study. Through meticulous ink renderings, mashallah, of Mamluk and Ottoman monuments, he approaches drawing as a tool for understanding rather than simple representation. These works allow him to examine geometry, proportion, structural order, and compositional harmony. His work has also been influenced by architectural philosophy of Professor Abdul Wahid Al-Wakil, whose mosque designs he has studied extensively through analytical and architectural drawings. MashaAllah. Truly a very, very interesting guest. I'm beyond excited right now. I can't contain myself. So now, without further ado, Mr. Abdurrahman, تفضل حياك الله. You have the mic.
Thank you so much. Bismillah ar-Rahman ar-Rahim. Alhamdulillah. Wassalatu wassalamu ala Rasulillah wa ala alihi wa sahbihi wa man wala. Thank you, Muhammad, and thank you, Ammar, for having me. It's really a pleasure. And I want to really thank everyone who's attending and everyone who interacted when announcing this talk. The interactions were really overwhelming. So I want to thank everyone. Let me start by sharing the screen. Okay, I think it's showing, right? Okay. So the title of our talk today is Meaning in Architecture, Transcendence in Islamic Tradition. And the key word in this title is actually meaning more than architecture. Meaning with a capital M. And as Muhammad previously said, academics, when usually approaching Islamic architecture, they approach it from a historical perspective. So they talk about the different dynasties, the different regions that Islam reached, and the influences of the different environment on Islamic art and architecture. But unfortunately, most of them do not approach Islamic architecture from a philosophical or an intellectual perspective. And that is what we're going to try to tackle in this talk. So meaning in architecture and not meaning of architecture, meaning in an absolute sense from a philosophical existential aspect. Okay. Now, there have been several very interesting studies that studied the perception of young children. And the results of these studies are really interesting, even from an architectural point of view. What they found is that children, when looking at objects, they do not see mere shapes, but actually they perceive meaning. So when a child looks at a door, he does not see just a rectangular shape. Instead, he perceives the idea of passage or threshold, for example. Or when a child looks at a staircase, he does not see a series of parallel lines, one above the other, but instead he perceives the idea of ascendance and elevating. And these studies and these results actually reflect a much deeper question, a fundamental question that is actually behind everything in life. And this question is matter or consciousness at the base of reality? And this question does not only appear in just theory or philosophy, but it actually reflects in everything, in politics, in art, in architecture, in literature, definitely. And so Islam, as a strict monotheism, believes that Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala, God, is the ultimate truth. He is the one, he is the first, and his knowledge is infinite. And God is transcendent. ليس كمثله شيء. Our human limited minds cannot comprehend what God is in his essence. However, what we can comprehend is his infinite attributes. So God, as probably Muslims know, have 99 names, but actually in Islamic traditions, God has infinite attributes. So God is merciful, God is one, God is the all-knower, God is the loving, God is beautiful. All those attributes belong to God in their absolute sense. And this world that we live in, this creation, is a manifestation of God's infinite attributes. فأينما تولوا فثم وجه الله. So wherever you turn, there is the face of Allah. Or in other terms, there is a manifestation of God's infinite attributes. And then the question arises, if God is transcendent and if God is one in such a strict monotheistic religion, how can this oneness, this unity, and the multiplicity of infinite numbers of attributes belong to each other? And that is what Islamic traditions and even philosophy describe as maratibul wujud, the degrees of reality. The ultimate truth, the ultimate reality is God, is the essence of God. And this is the essence that we as human beings cannot comprehend. Then comes the infinite number of attributes, and that is actually the extent that we as human beings can relate to. So we know when we say God is one, we know what one is. When we say God is beautiful, we know in an abstract way what beauty is. And then as the realities descend, we then have alam al-ruh, the realm of souls, and alam al-mithal or al-barzakh, or can be also imagined as the dreams and the realm of imagination. And that is the realm that we as human beings living in the material world, we can barely touch in our lives. And the lowest realm is ad-dunya, the realm of the material realm. And it's actually called ad-dunya because it is the lowest. Dunya in Arabic means the lowest. And this Islamic cosmological view is actually the guiding principle behind everything that relates to Islamic traditions, and most certainly architecture. So this descendance in realities does not only come in one direction. It's not only a descent, but also an ascent. So our duty as human beings in Islamic tradition is to try to elevate our souls and ourselves to try to reach the higher reality. So when you reflect more attributes of God's attributes in yourself. So when you're a good person, when you purify your soul, when you reflect those beautiful attributes, your soul actually elevates, and that is what we call spirituality. And this duty does not only it's not only a duty of individuals, but also a collective duty. So the whole community would work towards creating an environment that helps and urges people to reach those higher realities, and that is through politics, through literature, through art, and through architecture. But when we talk about architecture, architecture is seen usually as a physical realm. So we're using materials, we're using stone, brick, whatever, in order to build a building. So how would such a physical realm belong to a higher reality, a metaphysical realm? And the answer to that question is through geometry. Muslims, early Muslim traditional Islamic architecture perceived mathematics and geometry as an objective reality, or let me say the closest thing to objective reality. Because the laws of mathematics and geometry are timeless. They're not bound to any context or to any time or period of time, but they're there. They've always been there, and they will always be there. And so, what the early Muslims saw in geometry and in mathematics is meaning in abstraction, and since geometry is meaning in abstraction, it belonged to a higher reality. And since the divine essence cannot be comprehended, we cannot comprehend the sense of God, geometry was seen as abstraction that belonged to the realm of archetypes. And it is usually referred to as a circle, since the circle is the shape of all shapes, let me say, and is the perfect and complete shape. And from the circle, you can derive all the other geometric shapes. So it is the ultimate abstraction of mathematics and geometry. And as you move and as you descend downwards in the different realms of reality, the individualization and the differentiation starts to occur until you reach the physical realm, where you actually apply those mathematical laws and geometry in reality. Or let me say not reality, but in the physical realm. And the circle is actually the most important shape of all shapes, because the circle in its intrinsic properties is perfect. It is boundless. It is perfectly symmetric. Every point on its circumference is equidistant to the center. It's undistorted. So that is why there's always an emphasis on the circle as being a reflection or a symbol of the realm of archetypes. And probably the most important emphasis on the circle came from Ibn Arabi. Ibn Arabi, who is a famous and one of the most important Sufis in history of Islam, used the circle as an analogy to explain the relationship between God and our creation and the creation. So God is the center of the circle, and the creation is the circumference, the circle itself. But what Ibn Arabi noticed, even though he was not a mathematician, is how the properties of the circle really coincide with our reality, or with the Islamic cosmological view. The circle cannot exist without a center. However, the center itself is immaterial. It's non-physical, because if you think about it, a point, if you zoom in on a point, it becomes a circle again. It takes a shape, it takes dimensions. So it's no longer a point. So a point is only there in principle, in theoretically, let's say, in geometry. However, it is the most, and actually the base of any shape, and specifically or especially of the circle. So the point, the center, is independent of the circle, but the circle is in its properties dependent on the immaterial point, the center. And this actually answers the question, the fundamental question which we asked at the beginning: is consciousness or matter the base of reality? The circle, in the Islamic point of view, tells us that it's consciousness, the base of reality, because the point is the base, and the point does not exist in our material realm. And the circumference of the circle was seen as the infinite manifestations of God's infinite attributes. And there had been always a challenge, that a geometric or mathematical challenge that has been there ever since the ancient Egyptians, as far as I know, and it's called squaring the circle. Since the circle, as we said, it is the perfect shape, and it belongs to the realm of the archetype, the square was seen as a reflection of the physical realm, dunya. And this challenge in geometry is basically how to, and I'm not going to dive deep into it, but it's basically how to be able to draw a square using only a compass and a ruler, or a straight edge tool, with the same area as a circle that you've drawn. But what philosophically this challenge reflects is the quest to reconcile the metaphysical realm with the physical realm. How can you join both, or how can you create a transition between both realms? Now, traditionally, those different shapes were expressed in architecture in their own hierarchy, based on the hierarchy of the degrees of reality that we explained. So the physical realm was seen as the square, the walls of the foundational walls of the building, and the circle, which would become a sphere or like a dome, would be at the highest point of the building. And the different ways of transition in between them, which would usually be an octagon, reflects the intermediary realms. And it's actually in the intermediary realms that the different ways and different expressions of this transition occurs in traditional architecture in general, but most specifically in Islamic architecture. So here we can see, for example, from Cairo, how from the square outline of the walls, you move into the octagon until you reach the highest point, the circle and the center of the circle. Another way is done using squinches, which is basically derived or let me say developed in Iran and in the Persian culture. Ribbed arches also create an octagonal shape, and then you gradually move towards the center and the circle. Pendentives, which can be seen as also an evolution of Byzantine architecture. And then we come to the most interesting architectural element in Islamic architecture, in traditional Islamic architecture, which is the muqarnas. The muqarnas was seen or can be actually defined as a geometric pattern extruded in 3D. And every geometric pattern, and I know that we have many artists who are traditional artists who are attending this talk, every pattern starts with a circle. So the same hierarchy that we've been talking about is also expressed here in the muqarnas. You start with a circle. I don't know if you can see the diagram or the mouse. Start from a circle, and then the geometric pattern emerges from that circle until it reaches the boundary of the rectangular or the squarish walls. And if you look at it in a descending manner, the muqarnas becomes the materialization of the realm of the archetypes, of the metaphysical realm, into the physical realm. And if you look at it from below in an ascending manner, the muqarnas becomes the dematerialization of our physical realm into the circle, which is the realm of the archetypes, meaning and abstraction again. Here you can see it also more clearly how every row, every curve, every course of the muqarnas takes you gradually to the point, to the center. Here again, you can see it, the geometric grid at the bottom. It starts with a circle. The geometric pattern emerges, and then it becomes more defined, and finally it reaches its physical form as a transition between the walls and the dome or the semi-dome in this case. Another expression. And what's really important is that when a normal person looks at those architectural elements, he does not necessarily see the pattern or understands it geometrically, but the effect is there. You can feel it, you can perceive it in an indirect way. And geometry was not only used as a transition between the square and the circle, but it was also embedded within the design of the building. So the proportions, the composition, everything derived from geometry. And everything starts with a circle. So in this case, for example, the courtyard, or one of the Iwans of the Mosque of Qaitbay in Cairo, the circle uh, emerged a hexagon, and the hexagon became the proportional system from which all the composition, all the different compositions in this facade or in this building is derived up until the peak, the highest point. This is another example from Istanbul, the Yeni Valide Mosque. Everything starts with a circle again. The minaret of Barqoq, another Mamluk minaret from Cairo. You can see at the bottom, everything starts from a circle, and then all the different proportions and heights are derived from that circle. Al-Mihrab, Sultan Hassan. And these geometric underlying grids, let's say, are actually what create this spiritual feeling in those spaces, and are actually what define beauty also. Because again, if we're going to go back to the fundamental question, meaning is derived from the divine essence. It does not emerge from the material itself. So the stone itself does not reflect anything spiritual, but it is the reflection of a higher reality, the reflection of beauty in an abstract or in an absolute sense, what make those spaces with that beauty and that splendor. So it is not the physical realm, but the immaterial, the metaphysical relations, mathematical and geometric relationship between the different architectural elements is what creates that effect. Again, from Isfahan, another example. And the order of reality in Islamic traditions does not only occur horizontally, but also vertically, occur vertically, but also horizontally. So in traditional houses, but also in traditional buildings in general, the courtyard plays an important role in any building. And it does not only play a role, a functional role, but also a philosophical or a metaphysical role. At the center of every courtyard, there is a fountain. And as it is well known in Islamic traditions, water is seen as the source of life. وَجَعَلْنَا مِنَ الْمَاءِ كُلَّ شَيْءٍ حَيٍّ. So you have at the center of the courtyard the source of life, water, and then you have the natural world, greenery and trees and flowers, and then after it, the man-made world, which is the square, the building itself, and the rooms and the interior of the building. And usually the outline of the fountain would actually be an octagon. So similarly to the dome and the walls, the fountain would have an octagonal outline, which would reflect symbolically the intermediary realms, and then you go into the physical and natural realm. Another example from Syria, from Damascus, octagonal fountain, trees, walls. And now that we've established to a certain extent the paradigm from which Islamic traditions work, this idea of reflecting a higher reality was applied everywhere. So you can see it in furniture, you can see it on walls, you can see it in fabrics, on in everything. And as I mentioned earlier, it was a collective duty. It was not an individual one. And the reason why in Islamic art and architecture, expression is done in abstraction is because abstract meaning, abstract shapes reflected a higher reality. And that is actually one of the many misconceptions that academics usually fall into. Uh, they usually say that Muslims or Islamic traditions prohibited realism in art, which is not very accurate, actually. We have depictions of human beings and of creatures almost in all centuries of Islam. But the reason why Muslims did not approach art from a realistic point of view, from a realistic depiction, is because it was against their purpose. The entire purpose of art and architecture is to detach from this physical realm and try to elevate your soul into the higher realms, into meaning in abstraction and in an absolute form. So that is why everything was expressed in an abstract way, whether it was geometry, whether it was uh, vegetal forms or floral forms, everything meant to express a higher reality. Again, Iznik tiles and Pashani tiles from Iran, from Turkey and from Iran. Engravings and carvings from Cairo, vegetal forms and geometric patterns all embedded in one. From Al-Hamra Palace in Al-Andalus. So all the way you have from India to Turkey, Iran, Egypt, Morocco, and Al-Andalus, they all reflect the same principle, a reflection of a higher reality. And finally, I'd like to conclude with this Quranic verse, سنريهم آياتنا في الآفاق وفي أنفسهم حتى يتبين لهم أنه الحق. Everything that we see in our world is a reflection of God's attributes. If you look with a pure soul and if you look with the eye of beauty. And that is why many Sufis always have this idea of العارف بالله يرى الجمال في كل شيء أو يرى جمال الله في كل شيء. The one who knows God and knows the essence of reality sees the beauty of Allah in everything. Thank you.
MashaAllah. Thank you so much, Ya Abdurrahman. This is a beautiful talk. I think also very touching, and I think very elaborate in the meaning. And I think the meaning is quite clear. What you're trying to do is basically relate higher expression, metaphysical or spiritual meanings to basically the abstract like expressions of traditional Islamic art and architecture. And basically this is like, its conclusion basically in that last verse, سَنُرِيهِمْ آيَاتِنَا فِي الْآفَاقِ. Allah will show us like his signs on the horizons and in ourselves, like making that cross, like the connection between the horizontal plane and the vertical plane. So connecting all of these like levels of existence that you've mentioned, our worldly existence, the intermediary existence, and the spiritual existence. It's really beautiful. I mean,
thank you so much. Thank you, Muhammad. And I would like to point one thing. 30 minutes are not enough to tackle or to explain this talk.
You can talk more. Really, I mean, I think everybody's really.
I think
we can some more to add.
Yeah, we can discuss it further through the questions. But I mean, the main challenge in this, and while preparing for this talk, is to try to really stick into a limited time. I mean, not even one lecture would be enough. It would take books and a lifetime in order to just try to really sense the reality of realities. So
that is true, and hopefully, inshallah, this is not the last session, inshallah. So we can have more to develop on some of these themes, or we can talk specifically about specific structures. So let's open it up, and instead of us taking the time to make questions, let's open it up for questions, insights. So who would like to go first? If you go first, please tell us who you are in the sense of where you come from and what do you do. So if you're an architect, if you're interested in architecture, artisan, And we already have some questions in the chat, but let's go with Carl and then Mira. Carl, would you like to pick the mic?
Yeah, can you hear me? Yeah, it's good.
Yeah.
Great.
Yeah, we can hear you,
So
please.
I was very happy to hear you talk about this relation between figurative and abstract forms in Islamic architecture. A few days ago, it is very interesting. It's like hitting at the perfect time. I was talking with a guy called Joshua Jacobo, who is one of the people who runs the new Masters Academy over in the US. And he has been reconstructing the canon of Polykleitos, which is a Greek proportioning system that is 2,500 years old. And the Greeks were also not aiming. It's interesting how he said they were also not aiming to recreate reality as it is, but like as a more idealized form from a higher plane. And you can see it through their architecture, I think, where they are actually making new forms that are ideal. And I have been wondering for a long time how you can like sort of unite these two traditions. I have thought that it was a much more strictly religious paradigm shift. That in the Western Christian tradition, we have always thought that, well, beauty comes from Adam was created in the image of God, and therefore he is beautiful. But in Islam, I think the idea is that Adam was created with the knowledge of geometry, and therefore how to make beauty. Am I correct in this?
I wouldn't frame it that way, but just to answer your question in general, in Islam, truth is universal. So it's not something that we invent, it's something that we understand. And that is the same when it comes to geometry. So the same way the Greeks perceived geometry and tried to use geometry as an instrument to reach perfection or to reflect high realities, Islam used it the same way. Not in an identical way, but in that same paradigm, let's say. And that's I don't want to really focus that much on the theological aspect because I don't find myself, eligible to answer such questions. But architecturally speaking, yeah.
Okay. So let's take more questions because I think there is quite a few of them. So Mira, I'm not sure if you were raising your hand for a question or did you no
Yes.
longer want to? Yeah,
Salam
please go ahead.
alaikum. Hello,
Wa alaikum
everyone.
salam
How
wa
are you?
barakatuh.
Okay, so my question is simple. The muqarnas. You talked about the muqarnas, but not enough. I need to know because, I'm a tour guide from Tripoli and we have so many muqarnas everywhere. And I'm really curious to know more about, because you explained it, but I want more details about let's say the esoteric or like the spiritual symbolic of these shapes that are in 3D almost, please.
Yeah. The way you can think about it is very simple. Everything starts from the circle. The circle is the perfect shape. It is the realm. It is a reflection of the realm of the archetypes. It is a reflection, or like the highest reflection of perfection and of the divine, let's say. And from it, everything is derived. So when you emerge, when you draw a geometric pattern out of that simple, perfect circle, what you're doing is that as if you're, dissecting or I don't know, crystallizing that metaphysical dimension into the metaphysical realm. So the geometric pattern, just the way you look at it in 2D, it's a reflection of the infinite attributes and the infinite possibility, the infinite potentials and the knowledge of God and in God's attributes. It's just done in 3D, in 3 dimensions. So it becomes the materialization of the realm of the archetypes, or the materialization of the realm of the archetypes, or the dematerialization of matter into the realm of the archetypes. I don't know if that's the answer you wanted to hear, but I mean, again, those elements are all really very deep in if you think about them, and if you think about it, if you think about geometry as the fabric of the universe, then it's as if it's as if it's a sculpture. It becomes that you're carving into the fabric of the universe in order to create those spaces. So you can see it that way if you want. But yeah, that's what I can answer for now in this limited time.
Okay, but the Muqarnas, did it exist before Islam, or in what form did it exist?
The Muqarnas did not exist before Islam, but the Muqarnas itself, sorry, you can see it as it's about the transition basically between the square and the circle. There have been different ways of transition, as I showed. The pendentive, which was derived from the Byzantine, the squinch which was derived from the Sasanian architecture, but the Muqarnas as a composition, as different geometric patterns, because everything is geometry fundamentally speaking, but to draw a geometric pattern in that complex manner and try to extrude it as a 3D in a 3D did not exist before Islam, and that's one of the reasons why it existed specifically in Islamic traditions. It's not by accident. It is because it reflects this Islamic cosmological view of creation, of existence.
Okay. Thank you, Abdulrahman. يعطيك العافية.
Thank you.
All right, cool. We had our friend Sema. She had her hand up. Sema, if you would like to give us your question, please.
Hello, Samah from Egypt. Thank you so much for your talk. My question was also about the Muqarnas. I am not, my knowledge is not in architecture at all. I'm a translator, but so I didn't really understand it geometrically. Like I understood that it's a transcendence. I understand the abstract of it, but I don't understand the geometry of it, if that makes sense. So if you could elaborate.
So it's an inverted form of Mira's previous question. Okay. I don't know if I can share the screen again or not.
Go ahead.
Please do, yeah.
Because I think visuals, I think only like Abdurrahman and my friend Pablo that understands how corners work. Everyone else, we're clueless. So please knock yourself out. I think we need some more pictures.
The pictures are shown, right? The presentation.
Yeah.
It's showing us.
You know, one day we should have Abdurrahman back to like build us an actual Muqarna.
If you fund it.
I think we have to ask Abdurrahman to build us maybe a small school or something.
Yeah, exactly.
Yeah,
if you want, I'm just saying.
Inshallah. Can you see the cursor or not?
No, we cannot see the cursor.
I don't know where it is.
Yes or not? I don't know.
I can't see it.
I personally cannot see it.
Okay, anyways. You can see the rectangle on
Samah, if Samah can see it, I think, because she's the one who's asking the question.
I'm sorry. I thought you were asking about the screen. I can see the screen. I can't see the cursor. I'm sorry.
Okay. Anyways, that's fine. Do you see the small rectangular shape, the two squares with a semicircle in the beginning, like to the left of the center of the drawing?
The three small things.
Yes,
on the left?
three small visuals. Yes, on the left.
Yeah,
exactly. The one on top shows how the basically two squares with semicircle, and that's how basically that's the basis of any geometric pattern. And then when you descend to the lower one, you can almost see a star forming. I don't know if you can see it. Yeah, on the corner, and you can imagine the star, going all the way around the circumference of the circle, but the edge of the wall, the edge of the square is what bounds it and limits it. But and so if you start by looking, I don't know if you can, if I'm gonna be able to explain it, but try to imagine that the edge of the square on top and on the left, which are the boundary of the wall, it's the lowest level of muqarnas. And then as you go gradually towards the center of the circle, you start to rise up in the elevation until you reach the dome itself. And you rise up through these patterns. So every edge of that star, for example, or triangle or whatever, every edge that is closer to the wall is on the lower level. And then when the edge which is closer to the center of the circle is higher. And when looking at it in 3D, or sorry, from an elevation, from a frontal elevation, there's a gentle curve that really covers the space between both edges, between the edge of the wall, the edge that is closer to the wall, and the edge that is closer to the center of the circle. And that is how you get those concave, like mihrab-like those little curves and the curves that are carved within the shapes. So that's the simplest way I can explain it through, but it's very I don't want to say complicated. It's complex, but the principle is that you move gradually from the wall towards the center of the circle while rising up.
I think it's a little clearer now. Thank you so much. Appreciate it.
Thank you.
All right.
I think the conclusion is basically
I'm still learning myself, so it's a lifetime quest.
the conclusion is that we need Abdurrahman to come again to explain some of these things to us.
Yes,
Yeah,
please.
I think so. I think so.
So let's take another question. I think Pablo was asking a few questions. Ammar, would you like to? Pablo's a friend of ours, but I think Ammar, would you like to ask his questions?
Yeah,
Put them in the chat. I don't know if you can see them.
Yeah, exactly. Okay, cool. Pablo asked.
He has quite a few questions.
I mean, it's fine. I think it's fine. It's a series of 5 questions. So anyone that's waiting, I'm really sorry, guys. Okay, cool. So for Pablo, his first question is, how do you relate the realm of archetypes with Platonism?
Platonism.
There you go.
Platonism.
Is there any direct connection?
The short answer, yes, but with Platonism and Neoplatonism. And Ibn Arabi, whom I mentioned before, was also seen as some sort of disciple of an indirect disciple of Plotinus. But the thing is, again, in Islamic tradition, truth is universal, so it has always been there. Islam did not invent something; it just clarified the truth which already existed. So Muslims looked at previous traditions and other traditions as traditions that hold a certain, level of truth within them. So they did regard Plotinus or Plato as people who held truth in a way, a certain level of truth. They did not agree with everything. And another thing which I should clarify is that the Muslims themselves, the different sects, the different schools of Islamic tradition, have differences. So they don't all, they all have a general overview of the cosmological, reality. But they do also have differences in naming things and in many little details that I don't really know entirely. So there's an indirect connection, but you cannot see it as Plotinus. I mean, from an Islamic perspective, you cannot see it as Plotinus influencing the Islamic tradition. It's actually us and like Muslims and Plotinus understanding the reality as it is, the objective reality.
Nice, cool.
But also directly, that there's just like I'm sure like that's even Abdurrahman's point during the discussion is basically the idea of immutable forms or basically archetypes. These are basically الأعيان الثابتة. It's the same idea that Plato, Plato's idea of archetypes. But let's go to the second question. So, Syria, go ahead, please. If you want to add a bit more.
No.
Because he has a few more questions. Yeah, perhaps you can combine some of the answers with the previous.
It's just about. Okay, let me hear the questions first then.
Okay, are you aware of Michel echo charts or echo cards? Theory that the tracing of the Muqarnas is derived from the rotation of the polygons as described by Vitruvius.
And what's your opinion about it?
Hello, Pablo.
Yeah, hello.
How are you? Nice to see you. I don't think I've encountered that before, so I don't really have a direct answer for it. But please share what you found about it. It sounds interesting. I mean,
what it says is that the Muqarnas, you generate the Muqarnas by rotating polygons, and EcoChart says that at least all the examples that he analyzed, mostly in the Levant, the polygons are rotated in the same way that Vitruvius describes, that you need to rotate the polygons to determine the shape of the Greek and the Roman theater. So what the EcoChart says is that somehow those geometric recipes may have been transported from the theory of architecture to the practicality of the artisans in the Levant, and then from there to the Islamic artisans when Islam took over there. So that's basically, I mean, I think it links again with my previous question, and then the next one is very similar as well, because it's like, do you think relationship between the evolution of the Muqarnas pattern and the Islamic patterns in general, and the patterns that were used in classical antiquity? So it's a 2-in-1.
Yeah, but again, I mean, now whether it was influence or it was seen as an evolution from the Roman or Greek usage of polygons and forming the theaters and their architecture in general, we don't really know. I mean, we don't have a physical evidence at the end of the day.
We don't.
And we don't even know where was the first Muqarnas made. I mean, some people claim it was in Iran. Some people claim that it was in Egypt. I mean, some people claim it was in Morocco and in Spain.
India.
So we don't really know. But this is actually that's what actually makes it even more interesting, because it shows that there's an emergence of certain principles and a certain worldview in the Islamic world that is happening in parallel. You know, it's not really someone dictating something. It's happening in an organic way. Islamic architecture was not revealed with the Quran. You know, Islamic architecture, as you all know, the Umayyads first were influenced by the Byzantines, and it's actually during the first Abbasid period where we start to see a distinct architectural style that we call Islamic. So it has an evolutionary aspect in a historical perspective, but this evolution is all based on the same principles. And again, Islamic traditions, so in other traditions, and most certainly in Greek and in all other traditions, knowledge to be benefited from. So whether it's a direct influence, I don't have an answer, but truth is objective, and truth is there and geometry and mathematics is there in the universe. So
can I maybe interject very, very quickly on that specific question?
Please,
of course, the Islamic civilization has definitely borrowed from the previous civilizations, absolutely. But the distinctive element about the Islamic civilization is the focus on Tawheed, unity, the idea of centricity of Allah in all affairs. And that's what Abdurrahman was referring to throughout the talk, that everything that is happening is merely a reflection of the divine, that notion of unity of being, in a sense. These are all refractions of the beautiful names, or the 99 names, or the 120 names, divine attributes and names of God reflected. These are ideas that are not new. of course, but the Islamic civilization has focused them on Tawheed, which is unity of God. But also, we forget quite often that in classical antiquity, with the admission of Plato, with the admission of Socrates, with the admission of even Pythagoras, the father of like, the most one of the most influential figures in Islamic geometry, is the idea of decadence in the classical antiquity. That's what Plato is complaining about. So we see the Islamic civilization. That's of course my understanding of it, and also there are like a few others who have that perspective. But there is that decadence, and there is that need to go back to that idea of unity. So unity becomes a very important, decisive, not just a metaphysical principle, but it has not just an abstract idea, but it has a reflection on how like things are done architecturally, artistically, all sorts of like aspects of life. That is okay. So
it's all part of a tazkiyah, it's all part of a tazkiyah.
Tazkiyah is self-refinement through a methodical self-refinement.
And it's just, as I said, it's not just done in an individual manner. It's also done collectively. So everything, you're beautifying everything by making it reflect a higher reality, or the thing that reflects a higher reality is intrinsically beautiful, because beauty is the splendor of truth again.
Yeah, absolutely. So we have a couple of more questions from Pablo, and then perhaps we can take other questions.
I think that question number 4, let's skip it because it might require a very long answer, and it's better if the other ones. But what I wanted to say is that it's very refreshing to see these points of view being held online, and it's great that you guys are doing this. So we need more people.
Thank you
like
so
you.
much.
Pablo,
we need you again, Pablo.
Pablo, you should definitely plug in one of your things online from YouTube.
Sure, yeah, I would do that with pleasure. But I mean, I wanted to praise Adele for doing this, because it's really good, and I really like your point of view, which from my point of view is the right point of view. So it's good that you are promoting things the right way. So congratulations for doing that.
Thank you so much. Thank you so much, Pablo.
Okay, nice so we have now questions. I mean, there are so many comments and questions. I think Noma is next. Noma, would you like to tell us?
Na'ma.
Na'ma.
Yeah.
Don't get wrong. Yes, it's Norma. It's Norma, not Na'ma.
Na'ma.
Anyway,
can you tell us where you're from and what
yes,
you do
of
in
course.
terms of relation to art or architecture?
Okay,
Please.
so first of all, I need to salute you for the effort that you guys are putting. This is my first time I join a call like this, but I need to salute you also for the choice of bringing in Abdulrahman. I've known him for a long time, but it was so refreshing listening to him, and very, very enlightening talk. And I met and through Turasi, it's great. It's a great community. While you were talking, actually, I had to Google and research about the oldest geometric structure, and it was basically Göbekli Tepe, which is the world's oldest known temple complex in southeastern Turkey, and it goes back to 12,000 years ago, and it was like a hunter-gatherers before the rise of architecture. So obviously the geometry has been there for quite a while, and in different eras it was philosophized and infused with our, whether it's spiritual philosophy or whatever it is, but whether you can call it Byzantine or Gothic or Islamic. But my question now is more related. Okay, so I'm an architect and urban planner, and I've been working on the architectural identity of our city, especially that we live in an era which is quite interchangeable. So, and it really hurts me much because we have the history, we have the knowledge, we have the culture, we've invented the number, we've invented the alphabet, yet we still import, this westernized ways of building our cities, especially in, let's say, in the Gulf region, where somehow it's intangible, right? So I'm Lebanese originally, but I'm born and raised in the UAE. So I used to take it a little bit personal because I used to get defensive around kids whenever I used to travel over summer, asking me which part of the world I came from. Dubai back then wasn't the Dubai today. So they thought that I came from the desert. We lived in tent houses. And we rode camels to school. So I always used to feel like I needed to come with a good reasoning. Even when I grew older, being an architect sitting on the client side, I used to encounter a lot of international consultants and architects who barely had any knowledge about our culture, let alone the little nuances of people's lives. So they used to design things that are irrelevant, and you can take whichever tower, place it anywhere in the world, not necessarily in our countries, right? And it works perfectly well, but not here. So in today's world, the question is, why do we hesitate to call Islamic architecture as Islamic? And we call it Andalusian, Moorish, Mamluk, Ottoman, Safavid, but they all emerged from a broader civilizational framework of Islam. But still, we feel uncomfortable with the term Islamic architecture. يعني we fragmented it into regional labels like Andalusian and Moorish. So do you still think that Islamic architecture is a universal architecture, or is it more regional?
Thank you so much. First of all, so good to hear your voice, Naama, and it's a pleasure to be talking to you again. Now, thank you so much for this crucial question, actually. There have been many professors and academics whom I really admire, and they all have, their contributions. But some of them even claim that there's nothing even called Islamic architecture. It's either some of them take a nationalistic, perspective. So they say it's the architecture of the Arabs or the Turks or I don't know, Indians, whatever. And other take another perspective, which is it's the architecture of the Muslims, but not Islamic architecture. And I disagree with both views, actually. And what's really common between those two views is that they both miss the intellectual and philosophical aspect of Islam. In order to call something Islamic, you need to understand Islam first, so that you know what you're saying. This is most of the times missed when they approach Islamic architecture. And the problem also with the idea of, the architecture of the Muslims is because not only Muslims contributed in this architecture. We have the famous mosque of Ibn Tulun in Cairo, in Egypt. It is said that the architect who designed this mosque is a Christian. But then why do we call it Islamic architecture? Because it simply followed the principles that we've mentioned in this talk. It reflected those principles and it applied them in the mosque. So it's neither and again, fast forward to our modern world. Do you think the architecture that is being built in our Muslim world is Islamic right now? Do you think just because the tower that is being, or the skyscraper that is being built, just because it's being built by Muslims, does it make it Islamic? I don't think so. So the whole core and the whole essence of Islamic architecture is architecture that reflects the Islamic principles, the Islamic cosmology, and architecture which points towards the divine. Again, everything starts from the center of the circle. Everything is a manifestation of God. So this is my answer, basically. I think, yeah, Islamic architecture existed and will always exist in principle. Now, whether we practice it, whether we try to apply it or not, this is a different thing. But yeah, I don't know if you have any other comment or question that I missed.
No, not Abdmani. I'm
Yes,
not sure
yes,
if I'm. Okay.
yeah.
No, thank you. I mean, it is a dilemma, I guess, and I think we need to. Sorry, because I'm connected through my phone, so I'm getting interrupted with calls.
Yeah.
So yeah, it's
also,
just
one thing concerning the dynasties. Yes. Again, this categorization of Islamic architecture based on dynasties is also very distorting to reality. You have at the end of the day, the local architect, the local craftsman, they live wherever they are living, in Tripoli, in Lebanon, in Cairo, in Damascus, in Aleppo, wherever. And they're not really that, connected to in their crafts, they're not really connected to the dynasty that is ruling the empire or the caliphate or whatever. They're doing what they're doing. And that's why you often see, for example, I think we have this example in Tripoli, if I'm not mistaken. You have like the same, what we call Mamluk architectural vocabulary applied in Ottoman buildings, and different
and vice
influences.
versa.
Yes, exactly, or influences from other regions, not just from a certain period or dynasty, but influences from other regions, from Egypt, from Maghreb, Morocco. So it's much more really gradient than it's not black and white.
And do you think there is a way where the Islamic architecture could be revived in terms of its principles in a contemporary, authentic manner?
Great question.
This is a huge question.
I'm gonna shoot myself after this. Oh my God, that question. It's a great question. It's just a very frustrating question. Oh my God, no way.
I know. It's everybody's. It's a pain right in the middle of the heart.
Yeah. It's important. It's very important. But the thing which I need to highlight here is that Islamic architecture is not only about building individual buildings. It's not about building a mosque. We have many examples of architects who tried to revive Islamic traditional Islamic architecture, in the sense that we know the person who stirred the water, as we say, is Hassan Fathi, Allah yarhamu, his student, Professor Abdul Wahid al-Wakil. They all were able to at least prove that we can technically still build beautiful buildings that reflect the principles of Islamic architecture. But the issue with Islamic architecture from an urban or from a larger scale is not only limited to architecture itself technically. It's also related to finance, to the economy, to the politics, to the governments, to a lot of things.
To the guidelines also of any city.
Yeah, exactly. To the governance itself.
The governance systems.
One important element which I encourage everyone to look for is it's money, actually, and inflation. There's a book by Dr. Saifuddin Ammous. He's a Palestinian economist, called the Fiat Standard, FIAT Standard. And in this book, he describes how inflation and how the central banks and printing more money, and how inflation affected art, architecture, and affected our lifestyle eventually, and how this devaluation of money forces us to think in the short term. And when you think in the short term, you're unable to afford to build, or to think in a sustainable way. So you end up buying junk food, fast food. It's even called fast food. The same in architecture. You just buy or build what we can call fast architecture. It's something that is to be consumed, but not to be really sustained and not to be timeless and not to be beautiful even. You can see that in the apartments. You can see that in even the houses and villas that are being built nowadays. It's all a reflection of in one simple word in one simple word, modernism. This is the effect of modernism, but that's a different topic that we can discuss later. But yeah.
No, but I do think it's a really important topic, and I think we should maybe have a session specifically on that regard. But the whole ecosystem itself has completely changed as a result of modernity, as Abdurrahman is saying. So, like the idea of initiation, the whole idea that Abdurrahman is taking us through meaning first. So meaning comes first, and then you begin to construct. That's what we say even in Arabic. We say al-ma'na qabla al-mabna, meaning before form or structure. So with that,
Exactly.
I think we should take another.
Modernism is the opposite. In modernism,
Yeah.
it's the material.
It's basically the inverse. It's basically the
It's not even an inverse.
opposite.
It's the material and only the material. It's matter and only matter. It's not. There's not even a place for metaphysical dimension. Modernism.
No, there is no meaning. Is
Sorry.
something that is
there's
pointless
something that I'd
nowadays.
like to. One more thing, just to in Arabic, there's this poetry verse that says, وبضدها تتباين الأشياء. When you put opposites in front of each other, you start to notice the differences.
Yeah.
Look at what Le Corbusier, the father of modern architecture, the way he described houses. He said that houses are machines to live in. He described the house, the most important architectural building in anyone's life, as merely as a machine. It's something that should only serve a function, a material, physical function. While on the other hand, I once met one of a man from Aleppo, and Aleppo and Damascus are famous for their traditional courtyard houses. And when I was asking him, about how it feels to live in such houses, because he was born and raised in one, he told me in Arabic, بهيدي الديار أرضك إلك وسماك إلك. In such houses, the earth is yours and the sky is yours. Now, when you compare these two different perspectives on houses, you notice the difference. This simple man who probably used a proverb, a traditional proverb about houses, it clearly reflects the cosmological view that we've been talking about. There's a sense of verticality. There's a sense of ascending to the sky. While on the other hand, Le Corbusier, with all respect to him, simply turned us into I don't know, animals.
It's basically everything is here. Everything is related to the material. Okay, with that, there is a question from Ahmed Hussein, and then we can take perhaps the crowd's question. So, how does geometry relate to the fitra or the inner reality of a person?
No, I was trying not to really to go into the theological or philosophical sense without really tackling architecture within it. But how does geometry reflect fitra?
Relate to fitra, yeah, or reflect the inner reality.
Geometry in essence is meaning in abstraction. Now, the geometric shapes, whether the circle, because it's the most obvious, geometric shape that have intrinsic properties, those values that those shapes reflect, such as, for example, symmetry. When we talk about symmetry, you talk about directly balance. Balance, you can relate it to adl, to justice. It's very abstract. So, and fitra is something that we are born with, as human beings. So you could say that, I don't know, I'm trying to, analyze it while I'm talking to you, because I've never thought about fitra in that sense. But what you could say is that, your fitra that is born within you is able to have its receptors that can really perceive those abstract meanings that are embedded within the properties of geometric shapes or within geometry in general.
Beautiful.
So again, you can the guiding principle, وفي كل شيء له آية يدل على أنه واحد. Everything points up to the center.
And imagine
Okay.
trying to be the YouTube algorithm,
Beautiful.
trying to figure out what language these guys are speaking. It's Arabic, it's English. Anyways, let's Carl, please, sorry for the wait. Knock yourself out.
Let's also have, if possible, like a bit of brevity so we can take more questions as well, because there is quite a few still in the waiting in the chat.
It was a great, a great topic. So I don't mind waiting also. I was thinking about this while you were talking about this architecture in the Gulf region, especially. I had the pleasure not so long ago to talk to His Excellency Fahad Al-Attiyah, who, of course, is very passionate about his home country of Qatar, where he's a bit sad about how the tradition there has been supplanted with modernity right from the cradle. So it never had the chance to grow its own tradition. Where he told me essentially that there are many regionalized versions of Islamic architecture, as we talked about, but they are all actually sort of a part of the same thing, the way I see it, because you can grow them from universal principles, from geometry, from hierarchy, and these very all existing structures that can be relatable to all humans. But then, of course, each region will pick and choose the things that maybe it makes more sense to produce, or which craft person make, etc., etc. And in the West, we have had the same situation here in my home country of Norway. So naturally, I ski everywhere and I ride a polar bear in the streets, of course, where we use Greek columns and architecture for a lot of monumental buildings because they were regarded as universally beautiful. So, and then many traditions have sprung from it, making regional variety. So I think new identities bound to the regions can also be made from adopting these universal things. So I would hope that a future revival of Islamic architecture would also lead to this, that you could choose the parts and really grow regional varieties that are as rich and even richer in the future. Now, the question I have is a bit specific, because I think in Islamic architecture, you have preserved much more this hierarchy of private space and public space, that there is like a very strict or very thorough, at least, division of this activity needs privacy, this activity needs semi-privacy, this activity should be hidden, this should be public. I'm a little curious how it works design-wise when you make a new structure now in Islamic architecture, and how it would, how would the mindset be when you design it? Essentially, is my question. Like, how does the design thinking work?
Yeah, well, it's interesting actually. What's really beautiful and intrinsically beautiful about those traditional houses or traditional architecture in general is that the function is naturally there. It's not something that is imposed or done by force. When you do a courtyard, it does not only reflect the hierarchy or the cosmology, but it also intrinsically creates a sense of sacredness. And actually, this is something very interesting, and I think people should know it. The word haram, in Arabic, it's often translated as prohibited, but that's not true. The word haram comes from the word haram, and haram, we know Masjid al-Haram. Al-Haram is the place where the Kaaba is in Mecca. So al-Haram is the sacred place. It's not a prohibited place. It's a sacred. So that's why in traditional houses you have haramlik. It's a Turkified word of haram. So it's not that it is prohibited or it's forbidden, but it's sacred. How can you apply that in a modern building? It doesn't really apply. I mean, I'm based in Jeddah. There's something here that Jeddah mostly. If you leave Al Balad alone, Jeddah has modern buildings and modern apartments. And what they try to do in order to preserve this privacy is to not have as many balconies as possible. The windows are really tiny, and the glass windows have that tinted shading element in order not to be seen from outside. And at the end of the day, you end up in a box instead of a house. You end up in a in some sort of I don't know what I can call it, a box. So it just doesn't. It's inapplicable in my opinion. You try to force it nowadays in modern architecture, but it's not there. It's not naturally there. So I think in order to be able to apply all those properties, all those aspects, sociological, metaphysical, physical, everything, in order to be applied in architecture, you have to follow the principles, you have to go back and learn and know what you're doing. You have to know what you're doing. Most architects nowadays don't know what they're doing. They're just doing it for the sake of getting project after the other. Some of them are doing it just for the sake of being mentioned in magazines, but there's nothing really of pure essence, of nothing of meaning, to go back to the keyword of our title of the talk. So yeah.
Yeah, amazing answer. Yeah, I think that's very, very much applicable to our life today. And even me in Bahrain, very similar to Jeddah, it's the same thing. I think there will be a future, and this war is showing it that our houses are not built for the climate, and without the expensive AC, we will not be able to survive. And I think it's the same case in Jeddah and in the traditional places in Bahrain. If you do not build for the climate, you will suffer ultimately and extensively, you'll be suffering quite a lot. So I think most of our generation, be it at the Rahman generation and the younger ones, they're like, okay, we can't do this anymore, and these guys are building for their future, not my future. So we should go back to tradition because it makes more sense long term, anyways. So okay, cool. I think we'll take one question from the chat, and then we'll go back to Baqiya, inshallah. All right. Did we do Ali Aza?
Daniel. So basically, there was a comment from Asia Munir. She was just saying, like, we're talking about the Vitruvian ordering of architecture, but also maybe we should look at the Hindu temple, because in the Hindu temple there is, like, the four and the sort of like nine plan, the approach. So of course, this is also like on the mind of the. But I mean, Abdurrahman is here, so we can perhaps discuss that. It was not a point. It was not a question, but just a comment.
Yeah, and exactly, and again, Islamic traditions embraced other traditions as long as they benefited from them, in order to as long as they reflect the same principles and they reflect the same ideas.
Yeah.
So we definitely have Hindu influences on Islamic architecture in India and Pakistan. We definitely have Sasanian influence on architecture in Iran and Persia. So yeah, it's a valid point, definitely. And traditions, one thing that should be mentioned, traditions in general, whether Christian, Islamic, Hindu, or whatever, they share a lot of common things, more than we imagine. And they definitely share more with each other than with modernism itself. Because at the end of the day, most of those traditions are spiritual. They're aiming towards the absolute. They're aiming towards an objective reality, an objective truth, while modernism is just aiming towards downward, towards the physical, material realm, and that's why it just doesn't. It doesn't really cannot be reconciled with traditions.
Okay, there is another question from Daniel. Daniel is also like one of our friends. He is from Venezuela, and he's an Islamic geometry artist. He was basically asking what kind of books would you recommend to explore the philosophical side of geometry, perhaps to understand the Islamic geometry from a cosmological perspective.
Yeah, there are many books that you can find. I can, if you contact me, maybe I can list them. But the first that can come to my mind is René Guénon. If you're asking about symbolism and symbolic aspect of geometry specifically, René Guénon, RENEGUENON. He's like an encyclopedia on traditions and on the metaphysical aspect and the symbolic aspect of traditions and of geometry and of other symbols as well. But other than that, I'll have to really try to recall some, and I can definitely recommend, inshallah, if you contact me.
All right,
Maybe I can plug my own. I can plug my own work. So I have a reading circle basically in which I cover like the intellectual aspects, the intellectual foundations of traditional art and architecture. So the book that we're working on right now is Sacred Art, East and West by Titus Burckhardt. And the chapters of the book, they deal with the different 5 ancient civilizations and the foundations of their traditional art. And the one in the middle, in my view, rightfully so, is the Islamic foundations or the Islamic art foundations. But the book is a really, really intriguing book in that regard. Yeah, I mean, there are other books, Said Hussein Nasr, of course, Islamic art and spirituality. Yeah, another great book. There is also Keith Critchlow, who's actually a friend or was a friend of the teacher of Abdul Said Abdul Wahid al-Wakil. Yeah, you have quite a few. If you want to also like a strictly Islamic perspective, there is Dr. Mustafa al-Badawi. He writes on the significance of Islamic architecture. So they're quite. I mean, it's not a very big space, but that's why Abdurrahman's talk is very valuable.
Yeah, but yeah, it's accessible. I mean, it's accessible, and you'll often find things like intertwined. They're not fully separated, so it's not geometry, meaning, philosophy. No, it's all together.
Excellent. There is still quite a few questions on the chat. I'm not sure which is next.
We do have Baqiya waiting, Miskin. I think she wants to ask questions.
Okay.
Baqiya, please go ahead.
Assalamu alaikum. Can you hear me?
Wa alaikum salam.
Yes.
I've been following you for quite some time, Abdul Zain, and
Thank you.
I remember when I just started architecture, and in the architecture school, it was like in my architecture school, it's totally bad to do anything traditional, anything remotely traditional. And so your page was like cool breeze, and I love your drawings. So I wanted to ask that I'm also studying the geometry and doing geometric analysis of the mosques in Lahore, Pakistan. So I was asking if the way you derive the geometry from the buildings, from the elevations, and then you recreate them in your drawings. So do you first use a grid to analyze the geometry of the building and then recreate them, or what is the process of you making those amazing, brilliant drawings, I'd say? Thank you very much.
Thank you so much. Thank you for asking. Yeah, basically, now there are many references and many studies that are published about the different geometric grids or underlying geometric proportions that are underlying any certain building. But when there's no reference, I simply try to follow the logic of creating those elements. So I start with a circle. Circle is always in any pattern, in any design, in anything. The circle is always the beginning. Start with a circle. When you do a circle, you automatically have a square bounded, circumscribed around it. And from it, you can either try, try using, the golden ratio. You can try. You start with the basic shapes. So an octagon, hexagon, for example, and you try to play with the different connections and different ways those shapes can derive one from another, and it'll show you. It'll happen. And when you draw an octagon, for example, it will align perfectly with, I don't know, some certain composition or a certain proportion. And basically, I just do trial and error. That's when I don't know when I don't have a reference, or I don't know what the proportional system is. But usually there are always references, drawings that were drawn by others, and it's an accumulation of knowledge. It's not something that you can all that you can understand or study all by yourself. You need guidance in a way, in a spiritual sense, in a technical sense, in everything. This is always there, so that you can absorb this accumulated knowledge. You cannot, as an individual, reinvent or rediscover everything. So what I would suggest is you try to find references. If you're interested in architecture of Pakistan, of Lahore, I know in Pakistan there's a very famous and beautiful architect, Kamil Khan Mumtaz. You can look at his work. You can try to contact him, and maybe he can refer. He can have some references. You can look online. This is something that we should really make use of to try to get as much knowledge as possible. And if not, you can just simply play around and try to discover yourself what the hidden geometry is in any building. And actually, I would say drawing is the most powerful learning tool. I cannot really recommend drawing enough. You try to draw. If you're interested in understanding traditional architecture, try to draw them. Your eyes will see details that you've never noticed before.
Thank you very much. And I'm currently studying I'm doing internship, my first architectural internship with Kamal Khan Mumtaz, and it's a pleasure. I'm indulged in there's a huge library in his office, and it's filled with books on Islamic architecture and geometry, and I'm in heavens right now. And also, his son, Temur Khan Mumtaz, has created an institution of traditional arts, and I'm also doing a course in architecture there. So they are the ones basically who are teaching me geometry, and we are doing the analysis of the Islamic
Great. I'm sure.
and buildings.
Great. That's all what you need. That's all what you need, actually. Yeah. You're already there, inshallah.
Thank you so much. And one last question. When you're drawing your drawings, there's some music. It's traditional music. I don't really understand it much, but I love to listen to it personally, but I have no idea where to search it. So if you could recommend, what are you listening? If you can tell about it. I have no idea, but it sounds very heavenly.
Thank you. Yeah, thank you so much. I mean, I usually listen to 3 categories, let's say. It's either Sufi music and Sufi dhikr. This resonates a lot with what I'm doing. Other than that, there's traditional Arabic music, whether it's from the Levant, Sabah Fakhri, my favorite ever, or from Egypt, specifically also Sayyid Naqshbandi and other. Yeah, that's what I listen to. Thank you for this refreshing question, actually.
Thank you very much.
Thank you.
But yeah, if you could like get us in contact with one of the Kamil Mumtaz, that'd be amazing, honestly. I think he would be a great guest too.
Yeah.
Anyways,
The
yeah.
next question is, I think, was about, it was actually a really interesting question. Okay. Do you mind, Ammar, if I go for this one? So it is from MA. I don't know what the name is, but if you can tell us maybe who you are and what you do. But basically, the question is about social classes. So did the middle lower class Muslims also use these principles to build their own houses, or were these principles mainly used for the elites and sacred buildings? Can these principles also be used with modern architecture influences? So there is like two questions, Abdurrahman. So the first question is basically, were these principles restricted only to the elites and maybe sacred buildings or palaces or maybe hospitals or something? Or was it like kind of a generalized thing? And the second question is, can we use these principles in modern architecture influences? And this is a point that you wanted to touch upon, and I think you already have, but if you can also remind us again.
Perfect. Thank you for this question. Now, in architecture, there's also a hierarchy. So they, on top of different typologies or different building types, is the sacred temple. It's the mosque, basically. So those principles are clearly expressed in the mosque, but they are used also in houses, definitely. We showed like that in the courtyards, and courtyards do not have to be, a courtyard of a palace of 100 meters wide. No, it can be 2 by 3 meters even, or 3 by 3. So those principles are applied. And what's beautiful about traditional architecture in general is that the elements of traditional architecture are universal, and they all imply the same a certain meaning. So, for example, if you look at an archway implies an opening, implies, as we said, the study that was done on children at the beginning of the talk, it implies a threshold. So you could go from one space to another. When this arch is extruded, it becomes a vault. And this vault automatically, when you do this shape, it becomes a pathway, becomes a way, a linear way, let's say. When you put two vaults intersecting each other in a perpendicular way, it becomes a cross vault. And this cross vault implies an intersection under a certain point. So it's an intersection of different pathways, or a point of the first point of centrality. When you get this arch and you revolve it and rotate it, it becomes a dome. The arch is a dome in 2D, technically. So when you revolve it, it becomes a dome, and then you suddenly have this centrality that is elevating and is transcending to the highest point, to the center of the cell. So the traditional architectural elements are very basic, but they have intrinsic meaning within them. So even if your house, even if we are talking about vernacular architecture, that is very simple, very in a way poor, of lower classes, let's say, of lower economical classes, the principles are there, but definitely not as expressed and not as visible or felt in sacred places such as mosques and temples, because there's a sense of scale, there's a sense of this entire complete cosmology embedded within this single prayer hall. This is the first question. I think the second one was whether we can apply those principles in modern architecture.
Yeah.
I think we should first reinterpret what modern means. If you mean by modern architecture, contemporary architecture that is being built nowadays, then yes, I mean, you can apply those principles in any building that you're building, in any house that you're designing, at any point in time. And that is what's beautiful about traditional architecture. Traditional architecture and Islamic architecture is not related to the dimension or to the aspect of time. It's about space. It's about being able to craft and carve this space into a place where you can live in. So it's timeless. So you can do it at any point in time. But if you mean by modern architecture which is derived from modernism as a philosophy, then I don't think so. It's two different views, two different philosophies, two different beliefs, two different manifestation of those philosophies, materially speaking, even. Modern architecture, when you look at it from Le Corbusier and later architects, it's all about the absence of meaning, not meaning with a capital M. So no, we cannot reconcile modernism with Islamic architecture. If you meant that in that sense, if your question was that.
Excellent answer. Okay, next question is from Ulia Azza. I'm not sure if I'm pronouncing the name correctly, but she's asking about Islamic architecture. If geometric patterns are deeply connected to the traditional Islamic architecture and have spiritual meaning related to the Islamic faith, can they be considered Islamic architecture when they are reinterpreted in a futuristic or contemporary design? It's also a good question.
The question is, can they be reinterpreted?
Can they still be considered Islamic architecture or art when they are reinterpreted in a futuristic or contemporary design? Can you still consider that to be Islamic architecture?
Yeah.
And let's say this was our final question in the recording. We'll continue the questions after the recording, but we'll stop here for the basically benefit of the viewers on YouTube. We're still continuing, so stay on and keep your questions. We'll go through all of them if Abdurrahman's time, of course, permits.
Yeah,
but
sure.
Otherwise, we'll just stop the recording after this question. Please, Abdurrahman.
Okay, now it depends on what you mean by reinterpreting geometry and architecture. You know, geometry is geometry. The shapes are always there. But it's the way you apply them or the way you actually understand them, how deep you understand them. So as I showed you in the presentation, geometry was always the circle was always the beginning of any design. And the space itself emerges from geometry. So it's not just about, you know, having a geometric pattern, you know, printed and applied on a wall or applied on, I don't know, on a metallic facade, that's the way they like to do nowadays. It's not about just, you know, having a blueprint, you know, like or a signature. You know, this building is now Islamic once I stamp it with a geometric pattern. It's not that way. It's not the way it works. If you're and I have a problem with the word reinterpreting. Actually, reinterpretation as a word implies that you're rediscovering or you're discovering something new which never existed, and this again contradicts the idea of tradition, the idea of traditional architecture. So I wouldn't say reinterpreting, but I would say reapplying the principles, relearning the principles and applying them in contemporary structures. Then, yeah, again, the same answer. It's timeless. It can always be built in the past, in the present, in the future. The geometry is there. It won't change with time. The circle is a circle, and its properties will always be there.
Okay. So with that, we will stop the recording. So we're staying on after the recording, but just for the benefit of the online viewers, we're just going to be stopping here. So I want to thank Abdurrahman. I want to thank all of the attendants today. Thank you so much for coming today. It has been a beautiful talk, and it's so full of meaning. What I take from it is basically there was never a disconnect between spirituality and the material reality of, like, the Islamic tradition, whether it was in art, architecture, in the market, in economics, but it was best manifested in art and architecture, and that's what remains from the past to tell us that this life was actually a very prosperous life. So I thank Abdurrahman for that beautiful message, and I'm
Thank you for
really
having me.
looking forward. It's our pleasure. So with that, we stop the recording, if that's okay with you, Ammar. And
Yeah, absolutely.
yeah,
Before we go, everyone who's watching this on YouTube, please be sure to subscribe. Thank you very much. Anyways, I will stop recording now.